SumIfs is a useful function. I use it a lot. There's also average ifs, count ifs, max and min ifs. I'll mainly focus on SumIfs as that's the one you probably use more frequently. I'll touch on the others towards the end, and I'll also show you a pivot table which will give you the same results. I've got some sales data here, so I've got 4 parts. There are the descriptions there. They're all in the IT category range. See here, there's just one option, and it's over 2 years. So I've got all the months, and it's 2022 and 2023. If you've seen my other tutorials or you already use Excel, you'll know that you can use the sum formula to get the sum of all of these, or on the Home tab, you've got the Auto Sum shortcut, or I can highlight this and there's my total. I might want to add criteria. This is 2 years worth of data, so I don't want the whole total. I want to know what the total is for 2022 or 2023. And that's where SumIfs comes in handy, because I can specify criteria and it will narrow down that result. I'm just going to go ahead and start writing it and explain as I go. Equals SumIfs. So here the first option is the sum range. That's going to be your values. That's what Excel's aggregating. So I'm going to select here, Control Shift, arrow down and F4 to absolute reference that range. We've got the dollar signs here. If you're already lost, you might want to watch my cell referencing tutorial or one of my other formula tutorials, such as the math one. So when I add a comma, it's going to take me to the criteria range. I want the results for 2022 only. So my criteria range, that's my years. Control Shift, arrow down, F4, comma. My criteria, what year am I looking for in this criteria range? So in quotation marks, I'm going to put 2022. Now the others here are in square brackets. That's if I want more criteria. I can narrow it down even more if I wanted to know a certain part in 2022. But for now, we'll just do the basic one. Sum range, that's my sales. Criteria range, my years, and the year is 2022. There we go. If I then filter this to 2022 and highlight this, I can see that that's correct. And if I just use my shortcut Control Shift L and toggle those filters, so I've cleared my filters and I press Control Shift L again to add the filters back on. Alternatively, you've got the filter options here. Rather than write 2022 like this, I can put 2022 in here. Therefore, I can just reference this cell K3 instead. So I'm just going to overtype that. So I've highlighted that and I can just click this instead. Enter. And I get the same result. There I could then just change that to 2023 and that's my result. If we look here, 2023, that's correct. So I could have 2022 here and 2023 here and drag that formula down. And that works because I've used the dollar signs to fix those ranges. Another way this might be useful if you had data validation. Again, I have a video on data validation. So instead of having my year in here, I could go to data validation there, list, and manually type in, because there's only 2, I'm just going to manually type it. 2022, 2023. Okay. When I select one, 2022, that's my result. I'm just going to drag that over and center that so I can see it a bit more clearly. So it's 2022. 2023. So that's quite handy. I can then narrow it down even more by filtering by my part number. This time I'm going to have a list of my part numbers over here and reference that range in my data validation. I'm just going to copy and paste these over here, or I could use the unique formula. So here, data validation, list, and in the source I select that range. Okay, so now I have these. It's not changing at the moment because I haven't used this in my SumIfs formula yet. I can add my part description just so it's a bit more useful. I don't need to use a data validation as this answer depends on this, so I can actually do a lookup. I could have actually just copied these over here. And then we could say equals X lookup, this, my lookup value, my lookup array, I'm looking up this part number in here, and what am I returning? The part description, comma, comma, match mode, exact match. You can watch my tutorial on XLOOKUP if you're a bit lost. And then when I change this, I'm just going to widen this and centralize it so I can see it. I didn't have to absolutely reference this because I'm not dragging my formula down at all. Because I've got drop downs, I'm only actually ever going to be working in this one row here. So I don't actually need to do any cell referencing in my formula for this one. So what I want is for this to update. I've got my criteria range based on the year, but I also want to choose different options. I want to change the year and the part number. I can just go to the end of my formula and continue adding criteria. So at the moment I've just finished my criteria 1, that's the year, comma, and now on my criteria range 2, which is my list of part numbers. Control Shift arrow down. For this I don't actually need to do my cell referencing. I'm going to anyway because I already did it over here, so just so it looks more consistent, but I'm not dragging this formula anyway, so I don't actually need my cell referencing. Comma. So my criteria is my part number here. So if we look at this from the beginning, sum range, my sales figures, I want to add these together if my year here matches this, which is here, my criteria, and my second criteria is my part number matching this. So laptops for 2023, and just $58,167. I'll quickly change this while I'm here. Mobile phones 62545. $62,545, and just do Control Shift L to toggle through your filters. So there's also average ifs. For average ifs, I'd probably only want to do one of these. I either want to average the mobile phones, the sales of mobile phones over the 2 years, or just the year, just average the sales on 2023. So I'm just going to change this formula. I'm going to do this one from scratch. Equals average, and average ifs, the one with the S on it and down here. Average range, again, that's still our sales figures. Control Shift arrow down. I'm not going to do any cell referencing here. Comma, my criteria range, let's just do the year. Control Shift arrow down, comma, and my criteria is this year here. Enter. When I'm doing average formulas, I tend to wrap it in a rounding function. So let me just put round to 1 decimal place. So equals round. My number is my formula, and number of digits 1 decimal place. And that looks a bit better. So we're looking for the average. So we're just working on these. Ignore this for now. Our formula is just based on the year. So we're just looking for our average for 2023. Highlight here. So it should be this figure here. 4795.58 rounded up to 0.6. That's correct. And we can change it to 2022. $48,667.2. That's correct. I've just done a very basic option here. Obviously you might have lots of fields over here and you can narrow it down even more. And you could have more rows here, you could have your own little table here just extracting information if you've got a big matrix of data. You could also have a chart feeding off this, so every time you change these results your chart's going to update as well. I'll just very quickly show you max and min ifs. I'm just going to adjust what's in here. So I won't need the rounding, so let me just get rid of that. I'm just going to overtype this max, and then we'll see what result we get. So 2023, the max result out of all of these, if we eyeball it, we can see, there we go, that looks like the biggest, so that looks correct. And also if I highlight this, I already added my min and max down here by just right clicking here and ticking these. They're not normally there. 7769, and I can just change that to min. 1298, highlight here, 1298. There's also count. Count is a slightly different setup, as we don't need to specify a range first, because count is just counting the number of instances of fulfilled cells. So actually we only need the criteria. I'll do this one from scratch. Equals count ifs criteria range. So I could select anything, to be honest with you, but let's just keep with the year because there's always going to be the same number of rows. 48. So it's 49, but that's including the header, so 48 is correct. I do use SumIfs quite a lot, but you might find a pivot table easier. It brings you the same results. It just depends if you're going to use formulas or pivot tables. It's up to you. So with my cursor anywhere in my data, insert pivot table. I normally add my pivot tables on a new worksheet, but just so we can see it all on one sheet here, existing worksheet, location, let's just paste it here. Okay, so here's my pivot table. Here are my fields, same fields as here, and I can just drag them down and I can just pretty much copy what I've got here. I can tick them and they should land in the right area. Excel should work it out. SKU in the row, that's correct. Part description next to it. Year, see, it's not worked it out correctly. My year I want in the rows, and I'm actually going to put it ahead of the part. So I can just drag this over here. And that's what I wanted. And my sales, it should work out that it's a value. Sum of sales. And again, just be careful. It should automatically work out sum. And if that is what you want, a sum, you can just drop down here, value field settings, and change all of these. I do find occasionally it counts it rather than sums it. So just be careful when you're doing a pivot table. But that is what I want. So let's just go back to our SumIfs up here. SumIfs. I'll just quickly do what we did originally. SumIfs. And let's just do the parts here. SumIfs this. Control Shift arrow down. And my criteria is the part number. If I were to take out the year to match, that's my answer. So this is a bit more flexible. I can actually keep changing this. I can put my year in the columns. This is why people like pivot tables. I could just quickly change the layout here. Field settings, because I don't want that repeated, it's the same for each. So let's just go on to layout here and untick repeat item labels. That looks a bit cleaner. I can, if I hover over my year, right click on it, add as a slicer. A slicer is like a filter. And it's quite effective when you use the dashboard to have all these slicers relating to your tables. So here I can just make a selection or clear those and both will return there. I could have up here had my SumIfs, average ifs, count, max, min over here if I wanted. I can very easily do that in a pivot table. I already have my sum here. I can only really amend it there to have one or the other. Instead, I can drag this down several times. So if I drag that here, I'm going to do it 3 more times. So at the moment I've got the same result because I'm just summing those sales. It's always going to be the same. So either over here with value field settings or right click over here, value field settings. Let's change that one to average. I'll amend the rounding at the end. Let's do our max and min, then count. Value field settings max, value field settings min, value field settings count. Right click here just to change that rounding. Value field settings, number format. What I would probably normally do for all of these is to actually choose the currency one, but just show you the rounding there, just make it look cleaner. There are our results. And in the headers, I can actually just amend these just to make them a bit shorter. I can just delete that. So you can see in this instance, a pivot table is actually more effective. I'd probably use a pivot table, but it is useful to know about SumIfs, and I do still use that as well. Once you've been through a lot of my tutorials and seen all my formulas and pivot tables and charts, dashboards, you can then just choose yourself which ones you want to use. I use a mixture. Sometimes I like to have fancy charts, and with pivot tables you can then insert a pivot chart, but I don't always like them. I tend to prefer to do my own charts from data that I've calculated in formulas like this. I tend to have my chart feeding off something like this rather than this.